Hello, I'm Charles Alcock, and today I'm catching up with Darren Hill. He's with a company called Resolver. He's their director of sales. Darren, please let's start with you just telling us a bit about Resolver and what your core mission is.
Certainly. So Resolver, we work with corporate security teams around the globe, large and small, to help improve processes by enabling them through technology. So we work with a number of organizations with incident management, investigation, security operations, security risk, and threat management. And really what we're out to do is ensure that these programs that are in place in these organizations are doing the best to protect the people and the assets of those organizations. And we do it through the use of technology and data.
Right, I'm with you. And I believe you work to or around something that you call the maturity model. Can you just tell us exactly what that means in the context of corporate security?
So what we wanted to do was create a model that was sort of independent of technology in itself. So, a corporate security group or a security group could pick it up, look at it, use free technologies like Excel and SharePoint in order to sort of take on the activities. But at some point, you sort of get to this world where at a maturity level, you need the help of technology. And sort of that's where we come in. But we really wanted to create this sort of playbook, if you will, for security teams where they could pick it up, apply the activities to a challenge, and make themselves better, with the end goal of being, as efficient as possible and really getting a seat at the table of the organization and sort of providing a value back. And a lot of that comes down to sort of displaying that value and using the proper metrics, and that's where we really come in and help.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I can see you were trying to build something that would work for lots of different people's circumstances. So, tell us a bit more about how you develop the model. How do you start with something like that? How do you define what you need and get it implemented?
It's a case by case basis in reality. So, as a corporate security leader, we're not just a technology component. So we really do partner with our organizations. So we go in, we sort of assess where they're at. And because it's a process that we deliver through the technology, if there's nothing in place, we're a great starting point. You can plug it in, plug our software in, and sort of have the process built out. But where we really excel is that delta. So we come in and we do an assessment and sort of get a good understanding of where you are as an organization, where your challenges are, and then really look at the strategic goals, because one of the keys for security teams is understanding that their goals have to align with the strategic goals of the organization, or it becomes more and more difficult to get things done. And so through that assessment, we sort of determine the activities that are required at this current time to tackle the current challenges, while taking into account the bigger picture and where you need to get to as a security organization and how we get you there. So we really create sort of this success map, which ties very closely into the maturity model. And it's a process, and it's continuous, and a lot of the organizations that we work with, we have monthly or quarterly meetings where we're constantly going through and understanding those metrics and ensuring that we're sort of always staying on track as a partner with those overall goals.
Right. So this is absolutely not a static model. And as I understand it, there are essentially 5 stages in the security maturity model. Tell us a little bit about what that really means and how you're defining those stages.
So we define the stages as track, enrich, optimize, anticipate, and innovate. And we do sort of break those up into 2 sections, if you will. And so the 2 sections are 1 to 3 and 4 to 5. And the reason we do that is, like we said at the top here, we're always looking to work with, a vast array of organizations. And I'll go back to the example at the very beginning of a university versus defense contractor. A university is probably never going to be in that position, resource-wise, of pushing the limits of technology and security. But at the end of the day, the optimized stage is really focused on a process that's defined and being a piece of the organization, being a contributor to the organization. So very much a value add. And that really is the place where every security team wants to be. So we look at that optimized stage as a really, really key component, and where we tell every organization that we work with, this should always be your goal. And then that 4 to 5 is a fairly big chasm. You're really talking about sort of a big investment of time and resources in order to get there. And you're talking about big data, and that can be very expensive. But you are at that point now focused on the very proactive approach to corporate security, and sort of non-obvious patterns and getting out in front of incidents before they occur.
Yeah, sure. So just to be clear, how would a security team know, at any given time where they sort of are in those stages, and perhaps more importantly, when it's time for them to get to the next stage, what the sort of ground rules for that would be?
So one of the easiest ways is we do actually have a self-assessment. It's available on our website where organizations can go. There's a few questions they can fill out, and it'll give them a general idea of sort of where they sit based on some of the activities and challenges they're seeing currently. Also engaging with us, we have a professional services team who's, has a very deep understanding of the market and can sort of assess that. Now, when it comes to a measurement point of view, we do definitely go back to that assessment and say, what are the challenges we're trying to capture? For instance, one of the organizations we worked with, all of their incidents were coming from their security team. And so the first thing they did was say, we are not seeing the organization, because it's not possible that a team of 1% of the organization is reporting all of the incidents. It's just not physically possible. So we put a program in place where they had a tool that was available to the broad organization where anyone could report an incident. And in the first year, they saw double the incidents. And so we sort of had the key metric at that point. Those incidents weren't happening. It's not that those incidents weren't happening last year. They definitely were. They just weren't being captured. And so we knew what the success criteria was, because now we were seeing the magnitude of the problem. And so, at each stage, there's sort of some trigger points where you really know. It's definitely not a linear path. So we have activities that are outlined at each stage, and it's not to say there needs to be a checkbox beside each activity, and then when we're done, we move on. We're really looking somewhere around that 80% mark. Once we hit about 80% of those activities, we should start looking into the next stage and taking on the next challenge.
Right, I see. Now, you've described some of the interaction that happens between Resolver and your clients, and we've talked about the theory, but more broadly speaking, how does a security team go about implementing this within their own organization?
So we have a playbook that we've built out that is sort of the framework for this. And as I mentioned earlier on, the idea being that you could do a bunch of this through a manual process. There's a piece that sort of sits in front of this. We typically know it as like the guns, gates, and guards, the very physical components of a security team. There's still things happening even though we have those physical controls in place, and that's where the beginnings of the maturity model exist. And we've designed it in a way where if you're using Excel or you're using that sort of office suite right now, you could pick up the book and you could tackle a bunch of these problems through our methodology in those manual tools. As you start to get further and further down or along the progression, it becomes more and more difficult without the aid of technology. But the idea of the model is that it really gives you the data you need in order to provide value back to the organization, which in turn gives you those resources back. So when you go looking for budget to go get a project greenlit, whether that's software or whether that's a hardware component, you have the data necessary to make the business case to your bosses.
Right, I'm with you. So how do the teams that you're working with go about measuring how they're doing? What does success look like in terms of each level of this maturity model, and what sort of security indicators are they using to track the model?
Yeah, so generally earlier on, it's those, like I said, those maybe counterintuitive things, when we sit with organizations and we say, okay, so the first problem we're going to tackle is we want to see more incidents. And, so people sort of throw back in their chair and they say, hold on, we don't want to start this program by seeing more. We want to go to our bosses and say, we're reducing the incidents. But the reality is we have to show you the magnitude of the problem, and the magnitude of the problem is that you're not capturing everything. So earlier on, it's very much that visibility. And then it sort of becomes that understanding now of what those incidents really mean. So we're capturing more, but what are they? What are the more? And so we start to put them into categories. And once we have a strong understanding of what those categories are, we can start to put severity levels or impacts on them.
Right.
Sort of talking in that 2 to 3 stage now, where impact is, as much as possible, monetary impact. That tends to be how the business understands us. But there is always this component of a non-monetary impact, whether it's your brand, which then does go down to the money at some point. There's some non-monetary things that we're capturing, and once we start to bucket those things and really have an understanding of where they fit into the org and the context. So when we have involved persons, what's the disposition of those persons? So we start to look at data sets, sort of 2 years in, and we start to understand, like, when we bring up a person in our person database, do we have all the details of that person? Could we pick them out of a crowd? Could we sort of get a profile on who they are and what their potential, next act might be if they're considered a bad actor? And then as we go through and get to those sort of later stages, the anticipate and innovate, what we're really looking for as a success criteria is the connection of data. So the big data, the patterns in the data. So we want to be able to, look at an incident and understand all the things that are connected to that. And at the anticipate stage, you're still sort of in a silo. You're looking at big data sets, but you're looking at them in a vacuum, if you will. At that innovate stage, it's big picture. We've removed all the silos. We've got the data sort of connected, whether that's in a data lake or something similar, data warehouse. But we're really looking at all of the data together, taking single data points from multiple data feeds and connecting them to really paint the same picture.
Mm. Yeah, that's fascinating. It certainly sounds like with this model and everything that you've put behind it, we're at the cutting edge now. But where going forward do you see the world of security technology going beyond this, and especially as it relates to software, of course?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wish I had the total answer for you. But one thing I would say is, the technology itself is in a great place right now, especially for security teams. Part of what we're looking to do is, as we work with those groups that are on the further end in that innovate stage 5 area, is the ability to trickle some of that down to those groups that will only ever hover in that 3 stage to make them even more efficient. And I really think that's the most important part, is ensuring that it's effective and efficient for security teams to have as much as they can with as limited resources, because we all know in the security world, we're never going to be the richest business unit in an organization. And so the technology itself is in a good spot, and where we're really headed is in this world of big data. We've got some initiatives around machine learning right now, which are, which was something that an organization on the smaller end would never be able to touch, but through the use of our technology and some of the work we're doing with those more advanced groups, we're able to trickle some of that down and make it very cost effective to take advantage of advanced algorithms, and the machine learning technologies that we're building into our platforms.
Right, I'm with you. And does a situation like the COVID pandemic that we're in at the moment kind of give you lessons learned that might drive where you go in the future? I guess every scenario that comes up, leaves you with something in terms of, oh, we didn't think of that.
You could look around and notice that one of the first things that happened during the pandemic was, the groups that had technologies that enabled them to do their work and processes that were well defined were the first ones to get back up and running. Versus the groups that had manual processes or less defined processes even took longer and longer. So, a lot of our customers came back and said, through this transition, one of the things we learned is, like, we really need something to enable us. We need to connect to the organization. So where we were focused on a physical footprint before and ensuring that was secure, now we've got this group that's all over the place, and they're transferring data, and there's a lot going on that is now outside of the 4 walls that we were typically used to securing. And so we need something that sort of brings us into this new world, because we don't think it's going to change drastically or ever go back to, the 100% the way it was. And a lot of that really comes down to the technology.
That's great, Darren. You've shared a lot there. But if somebody is interested in learning even more, going even deeper, where can they go right now to get a bit more information?
So the first place is resolver.com. Our website, there's a lot of information there, but definitely given the nature here, we do have a virtual booth at GSX Plus, which we will have well manned by our team and of course myself for the next few days. So feel free to stop by and have a conversation as well. I'm always happy to chat with anyone. So add me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, and I'm happy to set up a time to chat. I spent most of my days speaking with customers. It's one of the things I enjoy most about my job.
Fantastic. Great to chat with you, Darren. We've learned a lot there. Thanks for spending time with us.
Thanks, Charles.